with the work they've done in regards to nature and bringing us closer to nature. Bob, for 13 years, has been a photographer in nature, pretty much a photographer all of his life, but especially with nature, and it's just phenomenal what he does, just beautiful. And he also has, for about 8 years, been traveling around the state of Virginia and other places to share this message of the nature of spirit and being connected with nature and what it does for you. And he shares it in such a beautiful way. So I will ask you to welcome Bob Schamerhorn. Bob, come on, buddy.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here sharing what's been a passion of mine here at my home church for so long. Throughout my life, I've had a connection with nature since my youngest years, and I think part of that is that I see evidence of God's grace in all the things I get to witness as part of my art and my passion. Since I was young, I've just always had a peacefulness that I find when I'm in the outdoors. I find it in the landscape and in the hills. I find it in the river valleys and ravines. I see it in the oceans when I'm at the beach or along the coastlines. There's just a beauty of the force and the actions of nature that have always spoken to me. My life has been connected with nature in so many different ways and in so many different places. I find it even in the plants, in the flora, in the trees, in the deep forests. I find it in the fauna of all the different kinds and forms it comes in, whether it's butterflies or birds. I find it in the mammals, large and small. So when I was very young, in my single-digit years, I used to like to go in the backwoods between the neighborhoods and sit along the creeks. And I was sitting along a springside one day when this little bird came within 3 feet of me and bathed in a small puddle that I was sitting next to along the stream. It's one of my most vivid childhood memories. This is the exact same species 40 years later here in Richmond. I've learned to sit quietly in nature, and it seems after a little while it sort of goes back to doing whatever it was doing naturally before I stepped into the woods. I witnessed so many things in nature. I witnessed creation. This is a small summer azure. This butterfly is about the size of a dime, and it's laying an egg. I see creation in the young mammals and in the babies. And especially this time of year in the spring. I witness love, something we all spiritually experience. Whether it's in the mammals or the birds, they have ways of displaying their affection, sometimes in just a look or a touch. Sometimes it's in a courtship display as they're building their home. I also witness strength. I find these are all spiritual principles I can relate to as well. And strength can even be in the landscape. As well as in the birds and mammals. Another thing I see in nature is partnership. Whether it's in the spring as part of their partnering behaviors, in the fall during migration, or even as something as simple as a fiddler crab. I see it along the beaches, and I see it along the rivers as well. I see it in the birds of prey. And I see it in the tundra swans in the winter. I even see it in my local neighborhood from time to time, and in the local parks. I see it in the south. These are limkin, a southern bird. This is the male has gone and extracted a snail from an apple snail and handed it to his partner to show he's a great provider as part of their courtship behaviors. I see it in the sandhill cranes in the west and the loons in the north. I witness parenthood. These behaviors happen in many different ways. This is, of course, our state bird, the northern cardinal. These are one of the species that both sexes cooperate in raising their chicks. Or perhaps the brown thrasher feeding its young. Or the great horned owls. This was just down the street here by the Carillon a few years ago. So nature is all around us if we stop and look. I see it in newborn ducklings, or in the American robin, or whether it's a parent protecting its chick, or feeding its young. Or keeping a watchful eye over its chicks, ducklings. Another thing I find in nature that's a spiritual principle is abundance. These feats of nature often happen in the wintertime when many species collect together to endure the harsh months, like the monarch butterfly. Or perhaps it's driven by the availability and abundance of a food source, like the hollyberries in late February, or just the leaves in the forest in the fall. Or at low tide on the beaches. Sometimes it's in the fauna. Sometimes it's in the flora. Sometimes these gatherings are great feats of nature witnessed in a moment. Another thing I experience in nature is peace, perhaps that most of all. When I sit quietly and just enjoy what's around me, watching things happen when they're supposed to happen, how they're supposed to happen. I find it on the beaches and in the forest floor. Or perhaps just an animal resting for the day. Perhaps it's a napping monk seal on the lava rocks. Or a snow goose resting in the grass. Maybe it's just an eastern cottontail in my own backyard. Or a sandpiper sleeping on the beach. There's so many peaceful moments in nature. Another thing I do is I listen to nature. So I invite you for a couple minutes to close your eyes and imagine sitting on a park bench in a safe place as the sun sets and the sound of nature surrounds you. Welcome back. I love when I sit quietly in nature. I seem to become part of it and it becomes part of me in a way. I find unconditional acceptance. Everything in nature just is what it is. There's no debating it. It all just exists. I think that's part of the peacefulness of it. An owl is just an owl, nothing more, nothing to debate. A whale is just a whale. I find diversity in nature as well. In all the landscapes, whether it's the Southwest deserts, whether it's the North Carolina woodland swamps, or the mountain riverine valleys. I find it on our coastal beaches, in the sand dunes. I find diversity in the animals themselves, whether it's reptiles or amphibians. Even on the beaches. I find it in the small animals. And in the large ones as well. There's diversity in the unusual. Some with short legs, quite strong. Some with longer legs. Some with much longer legs. We have great diversity in the insects. They come in every shape and size and color. Whether it's the praying mantis or a world full of butterflies. Even the birds have unusual species. When I look outward in nature, I lose sight of myself. I think that's part of the peacefulness of it for me as well. The world slows down almost. No more clocks and time and social media dinging away. I find rhythm in nature as well, whether it's in the waves at the beach, continually rolling in. I find it in the wing beats of birds. I see it in each day's beginning and end. I see the wonder of migration. As the seasons come and go, as we're experiencing right now, as spring comes in, mass numbers of birds will be migrating in and through the area. It's part of that balance that nature just comes with. All needs are provided for in nature. Food becomes available at just the right times. And I see majesty in nature. I find spiritual renewal, clarity, and peace of mind when I immerse myself in nature, when I find a nice spot in the park or in the woods to sit and let the silence happen on its own. It's a silence that transcends all earthly understanding. I believe I'm witnessing God's grace. I pray you will help us protect this gift of nature, of this earth that we're all a part of. I hope you'll take time to notice its beauty, sit in a park bench for a little bit, find your favorite spot by the edge of the river, and just watch and listen. Thank you.